The relationship between Iran and Jews, or between Shiites and Jews, is ambiguous. This means that there are many analyses and opinions differ. Everyone can have a point of view, from thinkers, scientists, politicians, economists, historians, and clerics. This means that there are very many differences in evaluating the relationship between the two groups. And if you review things from the beginning, it is possible to understand the picture more. I mean history, reviewing history, it is possible to explain things more to us. We cannot. We say that Iran's relationship with Jews can be compared to that of other nations. In the Arab world, the relationship between Jews and Arabs is clearly an eternal major issue among peoples, rulers, and everyone. The relationship of friendship between Jews and Protestants is also clear, as the relationship of friendship between Jews and English, Jews and Americans. The ancient religious controls or links between Burgundianism and Judaism are also clear, but it is a relationship between Iran and the Jews. The truth is a relationship that is not clear. When reviewing history, we may understand that the relationship between Iran and Jews is very old. I mean, you can say, for example, 2,700 years before Christ, and the relationship between Iran and the Jews. The story begins with the Babylonian captivity. We have a victory. One of the greatest kings of Babylon made an invasion of Palestine in the days when there was no. The Jews in Palestine have a state. He carried out captivity for the Jews from Palestine, taking them with him to Babylon in Iraq. This captivity began approximately in the year 597-98 BC until the year 582 BC. Of course, we go back in years as the years become smaller, the closer we get to 80. The largest captivity was approximately in the year 586 BC. He took a very large number of Jews to Iraq and established a Jewish state in Palestine. This is the seventh. Wars were raging between the Babylonians and the Persian state they were ruling at that time, a very large French state named Shark, and the founder of the French Empire is considered the Great Shark. Wars between the Babylonians and the Persians took place over the course of several years. The year 539 BC, meaning after the Sabs, except about 40 years. Fortuitous events led to the Babylonians' triumph. Cyrus triumphed at its great position over the Babylonians and then began to control Iraqi territory. It is said that this was in great cooperation with the Jews. The Jews, of course, the enemies of the Babylonians who destroyed them, so cooperation took place between the Jews and Cyrus in this matter. The situation, Cyrus triumphed over the Babylonians. From this standpoint, he returned a penny to the Jews by saying that he returned them again to Palestine, created a state for them and sold them to him and under his protection. Of course, the Shark was a great emperor, meaning a very huge country. Some Jews preferred to be present in Persia. After this victory, they did not return to Palestine. It is said that the origin of the Jews in Iran is from this group. This group that preferred to be present after the Babylonian captivity did not return to Palestine and preferred to be present in Persia. Montessor of more than one city in Persia mentioned, of course, the city of Asbahan, the city of Shiraz, and several other cities in Iran. Thanks to this long-standing presence in the 4th century AD, there was a sudden development in the Jewish situation in the world. Some Jews or some residents of the Caucasus converted to Judaism. The Caucasus is around the Caspian Sea. People often converted to Judaism from the Persians, the Jews who were present in the land of Persia from the days of Cyrus. Judaism began to spread around the Caspian Sea in the 4th Malian century, as we said, and from there it moved to Jewish Europe. It moved from around the Caspian Sea to Europe, and Judaism spread in Europe more widely than it spread in its original country. Estimates have now reached that 90% of the world's Jews are now European Jews. who are originally Caucasian Jews, who are originally Iranian Jews. What impression do we have? Judaism spread through the Jews who were present in Iran at that time. Developments took place in the Jewish community in Iran, a positive revolution during the reign of Darius Thamudristafam, one of the kings of the Persian state, who was in the 5th century AD and the 6th century AD. In the early 6th century AD, this also took place in development, especially in the economic aspect. The Jewish community in Iran was a wealthy community. This is the first in the history of Jews in Islam. After the emergence of Islam, the presence of Jews in Iran remained tangible, and when the Shiite trends appeared in Iran, something very strange happened. The Shiite trends were derived from Judaism. Some ideas were converted, meaning the origin of what is known is that from one of the founders of Shiite principles and Shiite curricula, Abdullah bin Sabiq, is originally Jewish. When the Shiite sects appeared, they took a lot of Jewish doctrines and incorporated them into the Shiite sects. For example, the doctrines of solutions, union, rejection, folding doctrines, the doctrines of beginnings, reversion, guardianship, more than one thing, and the infallibility of imams, and very many things that the Shiites took from Judaism. And God willing, we can give you a complete episode on the topic of this topic, impact. Judaism and Shiite beliefs. They had a special status in the time of the Buyid state. It is considered the first 12th Shiite state in history, of course, in which there were Shiite countries, but it was Zaidi. Rather, the Baha'i state arose in Iran in the 3rd century AH and took control of the Abbasid Caliphate and had very great negative effects on the world, or the Muslim community in general. The Jewish men were very clearly advancing, taking with them in their Shiite processions, and at the same time attending the Jewish holidays that were present in Iran at that time. Abu Na'im al-Asbahani mentions in the history of Asbahani that Jews were present in large numbers in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th centuries AH in the city of Asbahan, in a village specifically called Asbahan Juri. After that, when the Safavid state was established in the history of Iran, the Safavid state carried out persecution of the Jews, meaning it was the opposite of the path that exists in Iran. And of course, the Safavid state was originally a purely racist state, meaning a 12th state, and it was bit, meaning B. It denies or expels all people who do not adhere to this faith, whether they are Sunnis, Jews, Christians, or any. Any approach contrary to Mondays was rubber in Iran. After establishing good relations with Christians abroad, Iran formed an alliance against the Ottoman Empire. After the Safavid state came the Islamic State in Iran, and the Islamic State greatly improved the situation of the Jews in Iran. The pressure that was on them during the days of the Safavid state was relieved, especially in a rare time when one of the senior statesmen witnessed the disclosure and printed the 12 means. After the Ifsha state, the Qajar state emerged. Though the situation of the Jews changed, they continued to exist naturally in Iran. When the Corsican state fell in 1925, the Pahlavi state arose, led by Reza Pahlavi and then his son Muhammad Reza Pahlavi, the last Shah of Iran. There has also been a very great improvement in the Jewish presence in Iran, to the point that they call Reza Pahlavi, who is the father, if he is the great penny, if he is a repetition of the great penny, who originally returned the Jews to their state after he left them from it, Nebuchadnezzar. In the time of Reza Pahlavi, the Jewish community regained its place socially, economically, and religiously, and a very large number of synagogues were established for them. And they took a distinguished status. They approached the statesmen. But in the year 141, the Allies, England, France, and Russia BB by exclusion. The satisfaction of Pahlavi because he had signs of cooperation with Hitler. In World War II, and then when he deposed Reza Pahlavi, they put his son Muhammad Reza Pahlavi, who is the last Shah, in power from 41 to 79. And this period was considered one of the golden ages for the Jews, if he was very close to the Jews, very close to the leadership centers in the state, and they had a distinct economic situation. That's why they were stationed in Tehran. At this time, they were previously stationed in Esfahan and Shiraz, but from the time of Muhammad Reza Pahlavi, they increased their presence in Tehran specifically. When Reza Halal Muhammad Reza Pahlavi fell in the year 79 of the Communist Revolution, there was an ideological change in Iran. The nature of the charge was very great against the Jews, especially after 48, when the Jews occupied Palestine and established a state for them in the land of Palestine. The Islamic world in general was available, motivated against the Jews, and then there has also been a kind of motivation in Iran itself against the Jews, so that they do not deviate from the general pattern existing in the Islamic world, even if the Jews mean something. Today, at the time of the year 48 after the establishment of the Jewish state in Palestine, a large number of Jews emigrated from Iran to Palestine, not because there were no problems in Iran, but because there was a very large support for the establishment of a Jewish state in the land of Palestine. About a third of the existing Jews emigrated. Raised the Iranian ministers who were working on a coup, meaning they were removed, and he returned again. He regained his rule and gave the Jews their status until the year 79, as we said. When the Communist revolution arose as a kind of Islamic presence in Islamic society, they announced that they were enemies of the Jews in general, or enemies of a state. Israel is in Palestine, and therefore this means that this was the general form announced to the people. But inside Iran, the conditions were stable. A large number of Jews, of course. They emigrated to Palestine after the Communist revolution, but a number of them remained inside Iran, arrived. The number of Jews in Iran in the year 2021 is 8,500, meaning that the number began to gradually decrease over time, until it reached the year 2021 from about 34 years, meaning to 8,500 Jews, most of whom are self-employed and members of the middle class and the rich class, and the number of Jews present in Palestine is of Iranian origin. About 200,000, including former Israeli President Moshe Katsav, including former Defense Minister Shaul Mofaz, are Iranian Jews present in Palestine today. Iran is considered the second homeland for Jews in the Middle East after Palestine. This means that Palestine, of course, has the largest Jewish community, followed by Iran. Of course, most Arab countries had Jews, especially Egypt and Morocco and Tunisia. But after the year 48, all the Jews went to Palestine, but the Jews of Iran remained the ones who were represented, the largest mass. After the Palestine bloc, the Jews in the Islamic Shura Council of Iran are represented by a permanent member, who always has a Jewish member in it. In the governing council in Iran, Iran has 76 synagogues, now 31 in Tehran, and the Tashar Hills in Shiraz. The Jews in Iran have 5 religious schools, they have 5 restaurants that operate in accordance with Jewish law, and they have a charitable hospital south of Tehran that depends on Jewish donations from inside and outside and abroad. Some Muslims were making donations to this Jewish hospital, including former President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, who is the Iranian president of the crisis. The relationship between Jews and Iran has always been within the framework of media hostility. You don't find explicit wars between the two sides, even after a Hezbollah activist, Hezbollah, originated in 1982 in Lebanon, year A, clearly admits that he is one, meaning the A, explicitly supported by Iran. Their wars with the Jews, as you always see and follow, do not accept losses. There are no victims left. Not really, but it means a big media bang. But what is announced is that the Jews are enemies of Iran, and Hezbollah But as you see it, there are no victims that we see, for example, in Gaza or in anywhere else in Palestine or in their war with Egypt, for example, the Jews with Syria or not. Things have always been something of extreme restraint. These discussions are mainly media debates with minimal real-world impact. Interestingly, the Prophet Muhammad, may God bless him and grant him peace, he told us that the friendly relationship between the Jews and Iran will continue until shortly before the hour. When the matter of the Antichrist was mentioned, it was mentioned that 70,000 Jews of Aswan and Wu would go out with the Antichrist. This means that when the chicken comes out, the origin of the Jews will be more than that. And we have an episode on this topic. They returned to it entitled, The Jews of Asbahan, the Soldiers of the Antichrist, this one. The sign says that 70,000 Jews will come out of them. Does this mean that they are more than 70,000 Spaniards alone? However, if it is possible that there are offers in other cities, what is Iranian? The relationship continues to this time. Why do I imagine? The Jews at the time are 8,500 Jews in Iran, and in the days of the Antichrist, there will remain 70,000 and more than those present in it. In Iran, the increase, I imagine, is the result of another displacement that will occur at the end of time from Palestine to Iran. Palestine will eventually be an Islamic caliphate with Jerusalem as its capital. Does this imply liberation from the Jews? It's possible Jews might leave Palestine before that, prompting Muslims to establish a caliphate there. Where will these Jews relocate? Perhaps some will go to Iran. The Prophet, may God bless him and grant him peace, alluded to this before the signs of the last hour as a potential trial by the Antichrist, who will lead Jews back to Palestine. Jews to Palestine. It will be in the land of Palestine. After that, the Antichrist perished, and the destruction of the Jews in the battle in which the stone and the trees were pronounced. This is the story of the Jews in Iran. Iran for them is a place considered sacred because it has a shrine. The Prophet Daniel has a shrine for Esther and Mordecai, her uncle. This story is significant. Jewish history requires episodes to discuss it in detail. There are shrines for some of the prophets' rights in one of the Jewish prophets, which are also found in Iran, making them represent a kind of holiness and relationship today. The strong relationship between the two groups. Of course, the topic needs as much detail as possible in upcoming episodes, God willing. You have some clarifications. May God reward you well, and may God's peace, mercy, and blessings be upon you.